everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and today I have with me Mr. Richard Haiduck. He is the author of the upcoming book, Shifting Gears, 50 Baby Boomers Share Their Meaningful Journeys in Retirement. So first and foremost, Richard, welcome to the show. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lana. Glad to be on the show.
Awesome. So baby boomers, that wonderful, vibrant, go get 'em group of people 65 and over, right?
That is correct, yeah.
All righty. So I am assuming, Richard, you could correct me if I'm wrong, that you were somebody, had another life before you yourself became a baby boomer. So what were you before retirement life hit you? What were you doing with yourself?
So I worked in the life science industry with startup biotech companies. I was CEO of a couple of them. And then the last several years, I was a mentor to startup CEOs of biotech companies. So I spent about 12 years doing that.
Awesome. Awesome. Very biotech. That's a very prevalent topic in today's world that we're living in, right?
It is. It's gotten a little more political than when I was there.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. That's great. So the book that you have coming out, Retirement, what sparked you to write it? How did it come to be?
Two parts to the answer to that. When I was 7 years old, I was convinced I wanted to be an author. and so every day I had this writing pad that my parents had gotten me, and every day I'd write a story. The longest story was one full page. Most of them were a half page. And they were always about something weird, something sci-fi or fantasy or whatever. And so I did that for almost a year and wrote a whole bunch of stories. And then at the end of the year, I turned 8 and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I got other things to do. I want to go out and play with my buddies, play some basketball, do something like that.
7-year-old, typical 7-year-old, right?
So the 7-year-old made it for about a year. 65 years later, I came back to this. So at age 72, I said, well, wait a minute. I've had a long time to think about this. What triggered that was not so much the desire to be an author, but I started just hearing from buddies of mine about cool stuff they were doing in retirement. And Lana, one of the most surprising things, some of these were people that I'd known for years, and they started doing things that I had no idea they were doing. One guy said, I never told you I was in the Senior Olympics. And I said, what do you mean you never told me you were in the Senior Olympics? And he says, and I won a medal.
Wow.
And he started telling me this story. And then a couple of weeks later, somebody else would tell me something that they had done. And there was this kind of eureka moment where I said, these stories need to be told. There's so many neat stories. There's so much fun involved. There's so much inspiration. In some cases, so much sadness, all over the map. But telling stories about retirement was something that I thought deserved to be done.
Great, great. And I think the philosophy, the mindset, or the perception of retirement has changed prior to decades ago, because you had this concept that was, you worked 40 years for some company and then you went and sat on the porch until it was your time. That was the concept of retirement. But now you see this wonderful generation of people, they're out there reinventing themselves. They're doing things and they're living, in some cases, a much more healthier lifestyle, more vibrant lifestyle than they were post retirement. Do you find that to be the case?
It was neat to hear. Several of the people I interviewed said, these are the best years of my life. Oh, I'm having more fun, or I'm making more contribution, or I'm helping more people. This is a very special time. And then they said, and I'm surprised. I didn't know it was going to be like this. I didn't know this was going to be so cool.
Great.
Now, this isn't everybody I interviewed. Some people said, this is miserable. Why am I doing this? Or I wish I were working again, or whatever.
Oh, I see.
So what I tried to do was not pick just the optimists, but get a broad range of experience, broad range of stories. One of the early reviewers of the book said, you've captured the exotic to the mundane. And I said, is that a compliment or an insult? I'm not sure.
Great. Now you just mentioned something, and my own grandfather, he went through this when he retired, that seems to be one of the challenges of retirement is you go from this, I get up every day, I'm doing something to, oh, wow, I don't really have anything to do. And that shift can be a challenge. But in the work that you're doing, in your research for the book and the interviews that you've done, what are some of the other challenges that you've seen retirees having to go through in that shift, that adjustment?
I think that first morning when you get up, when you don't have a job,
Oh,
what am I going to do all day is a big question. And you know, everybody kind of deserves a time to just goof off and be a couch potato or watch a football game or whatever. But fairly soon after that, they say, no, I've got to do something more than that. I've got to have a more active kind of a lifestyle. But the thing that a lot of people experienced was, I can multitask my retirement. It's not like I have to get up every morning and do the same thing. I
mm-hmm.
can do different things each day, and that might mess with my mind for a while. It's like when you have to get up every morning and go to the office, or you have to get up every morning and go to the factory. There's no decision involved. You just do it.
Mm-hmm.
When you've got this openness and this flexibility to say, I think I'll do some volunteer work today. I think I'll do some project around the house today. I think I'll take a trip next week. When you've got that freedom and flexibility, a lot of people don't naturally attune to that. They say, wait, I want to have a routine.
You want structure.
One lady who had what I thought was a delightful retirement, and she was doing like 3 very separate, distinct activities. And she said, it doesn't feel right. And I said, why not? It sounds like it's perfect. And she said, I'm not used to it yet. She said, I think I'll get used to it. But I used to get up, as she was a teacher, she said, I used to get up in the morning and I knew I was going into the school and I was going to teach the kids. She said, now she's doing some work environmentally. She's doing some mosaic teaching.
Okay.
She's, just got different, and she does some volunteering in a park as well. And each day is something different. And that sounds easy, but it turns out it's not. It turns out that if every day is different, you kind of got to manage your calendar a little bit. You got to manage your mind a little bit. You've got to manage the expectations of the people around you.
Great.
All of them think, oh, you're retired, you can help out with this.
I
well, no,
see.
I'm busy today. No, I'm doing this other thing today.
I don't want to be about you today. I might want to just have a me day. I don't want you to assume and take my time for granted. I hear that. Now, one of the things that you hear a lot of retirees struggling with, because it's just not as easy to retire as in past generations, is that they're having to retire, but they're having to go back to work. I mean, finances is sometimes very difficult, but I would assume that continuing to work adds an element of keeping you mentally alert and sharp or whatever, or what is your take on that?
So the 2 big clouds kind of hanging over great retirements are health and wealth.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have money and you don't have your health, it's hard to figure out how this is going to be a great time in your life. But the things that I found were people were able to do work that gave them kind of some income to top them up so they could take a nice vacation or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But they did things that they enjoyed doing rather than what they had to do.
Gotcha.
So one of my really favorite stories, this guy said, I'd really love to interview with you. I've got these great things that I'm doing. I'm driving Uber. And I thought, that sounds kind of boring. It's like you get in the car and drive people around.
Yeah, the things they see and hear, right?
Well, you got it. You're stealing my punchline here. So what he said to me, he said, there's 2 things that happen. And one of these is kind of a male perspective as well. The first thing is the people get in my car and I get to tell them a story or a joke. And he says, that's kind of fun. I love telling stories. And he says, but then I drop them off the next person gets in, I get to tell the same story over again.
Just like new, right?
And he said, and they're interested, they're excited, they enjoy it. If I did that at a cocktail party, they'd shoot me. I get to tell the same stories over and over and over for like weeks at a time.
Oh, great. That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. Now, go ahead.
And I was going to say, and then the second thing, he said, there's a joy to this also. He said, I'm an old guy. He says, I don't get to see pretty girls very often.
Oh, yeah.
But when they get in my car, they get in the car and I laugh with them and I tell some stories. And he says, that's really a treat for an old guy.
Yeah.
And he said, but there's a catch to it. When I go home and tell my wife about that, any fares that I had for a pretty woman, I have to give her the fares.
That's too precious. That's too precious.
So this guy, I mean, he started out saying, I'm going to drive Uber and it's going to top up my income. And I thought, well, yeah, I don't think you're going to make the cut for the book. But once he said how much that fit with his personality, with his lifestyle, the flexibility of being able to do it when he feels like it. I suppose when he gets a new joke, he probably wants to go drive some more. But it says this is work, but that's not like the work.
It's fun work.
It's fun work.
It's fun work.
And another lady she says, I've got to keep doing something, but I want it to be something fun. Mm-hmm. And so she signed up to be a wine country tour guide. Mm-hmm. And she became kind of a student of wines. She learned a lot about them. And she said, but the people show up. They got a big smile on their face. They want to have a good time. And they just want me to help them have a good time. And she said, this is so much fun. I'm getting paid for it, but this is really a fun way to spend time.
What an emotional boost. That's a wonderful thing. Now I want to backtrack to the Uber guy because it brings to mind this stereotypical concept we have about maleness and male perspective, and I have to work and provide and be this man in the household. What is the male dynamic or issues or perspective going into retirement? What are some adjustments that you might see that men have to go through in this change of life?
There's a potential for a loss of self-worth. There's a potential for my job and myself were one and the same. People say, oh, who are you? You say, well, I work at XYZ. And that loss of identity and the sense of self-worth that goes with it, it happens until you've got something else that fills the space. Okay. And for those people who don't fill that space, they have a more permanent loss of self-worth. One of the ladies that I interviewed had a consulting business where she would deal with doctors and mostly male doctors. Mm-hmm. And her comment was, you know what? My male doctors cannot retire nearly as well as I can. She said, they are a doctor. And that is who they are. Okay. And loss of self-worth. She says, every one of my clients who's retired has gone through that. And some get through to the other side and some don't. But she said, retirement's easy for a woman. Okay. But for a man, they've got this identity to their career.
Understood.
Because they haven't had a life of multitasking the way most women do.
Got you. Understood.
They're more focused. I am my job. I go to work every day. My job is me. And people disengaged in a lot of different ways from that.
Okay. So in your own household, can we assume, or is it safe to say that your wife transitioned into retirement better than you did?
I'm pretty good at it.
So it was a breeze for me.
Actually, I without going too far back into this, I had this plan. I had a consulting business, and I said, I want to ease into retirement. And so I had this plan. Each year I would do one less client, and I'd do one new retirement activity. Mm. So over about a 5-year period, I went from working full-time to working not at all. But each year I would work less, and each year I would retire more.
Good strategy.
And my friend said, that'll never work. You can't control the pace of your consulting business like that.
He says, watch me.
That's what I said. I said, watch me. I think I can. And I hope none of my clients are listening, but I think they felt it worked okay.
Okay.
Because in my consulting business, you get to a certain point where you've helped them all you can and it's time to go. And before that, I probably overstayed a little bit. I wanted to make sure everything was okay. But with this kind of schedule for myself to wind down, I disengaged from some clients. They became more independent of me. And I think I did them a favor by leaving in that way.
Okay.
And then so the retirement thing was pretty easy. I just kept adding things and doing things. And then more recently, I said, well, I think writing a book would be fun. Let's go do that.
Got you. So how did you find your people to interview for the book?
The short answer is networking. I started with buddies of mine and men and women who I knew had some interesting things to tell me. And then my last question was always, who else should I talk to?
Okay.
And everybody's got some friends who have done something that they say, oh, that's amazing. One lady sent me to 3 just amazing interviews across the country that I would never have met without her. So I tried to get the country pretty broadly covered. At one point I said, I'd like to get somebody up in Alaska, but my network doesn't really get to Alaska so well. So I advertised on Craigslist, and I said, I don't know what'll happen with them. And I said, do you want to tell your retirement story? And this guy stepped forward and he says, I've got a great retirement story. I'd be glad to tell you. And I was just communicating with him the other day, and he said, I'm so glad to see the book has come along. I still can't believe I responded to a Craigslist ad.
That's amazing. I love it. Because you have 2 spectrums of baby boomers, some that don't do internet technology at all, and then you have some that have embraced it. So it's wonderful to see that's a good thing. A Craigslist posting. So the book has been in the works for some time?
About a year and a half. So the interview process took about 6 months, and then the rest of it's kind of getting the book edited and produced. I at one point, my opening question was always the same: tell me about this stage of your life, and then shut up and listen, let the tape recorder run. And I got some amazing stories. I got some people rambling on and on and on too. When I got done with my interviews, I had 800 pages of transcripts.
Wow. Awesome.
And I thought, first time author, can I do an 800-page book? I don't think so.
You got to narrow this down a little bit. Now, you've mentioned the Uber driver and a couple other, but are there any other stories in the book that stand out?
I had several. One in particular, a guy who had a long and successful career. He was diagnosed with cancer at about the same time he was retiring, just shortly before he retired. And so he was devastated by that. He said, I had all these things I wanted to do in retirement. He started getting treated. He made some treatment choices, which turned out to be the right choices.
Okay.
And about halfway through his treatment, he turned to one of his doctors and he said, you guys have really been great to me. How can I help you? And his belief was they'd say, oh, write me a check, which he said that I was hoping it was something other than that. But they said, no, this community needs a cancer house, and a cancer house where people who are being treated could stay between their treatments, where the families could stay, and where it could be either free or very affordable for people. We need that in this community. Can you help us?
Mm-hmm.
Making a long story short, soon he was leading the effort to get the medical center, the community, various volunteers to get the land, get the building built, get the raising about $4 million. And the project was successfully completed, and it was just a major change for the community.
Splendid.
And this guy said, I've never had so much fun on a project. I've never been so relaxed on a project that was so important. Um, but at the end of it, I've never felt better about anything I've done in my life.
Yeah.
I changed things in a way that wasn't like what I did when I was working. So it was great to see his perspective on that and his sense of self-worth on the project.
Great.
And this is a guy who had a lot of things that he was going to do in his retirement. But once he got into that, he went in, all the way up to his neck.
Yeah. It's great. It makes you understand, because we see these pictures on the internet all the time of President Jimmy Carter. He's out there, he's building the houses, and he keeps on getting injured, but he recovers and he goes back. And we're all looking like, why don't you just sit down somewhere? You're entitled to it. But it creates such your sense of self, and you're doing something and it's rewarding, and you need that. So you begin to understand, like with the story that you just shared, that it gives you more back and it keeps you going, it keeps you alive and vibrant. So we can understand. That's a beautiful story. Now,
yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
I was going to say Jimmy Carter is actually mentioned in the book, strangely enough. Not that I interviewed him, but he works with Habitat for Humanity, who has, one of the guys I interviewed is very involved in Habitat for Humanity, and they invited Jimmy Carter to come out and do kind of work on some houses with them. So that was really a great moment for that group. They really enjoyed having him there. And he said one other thing that probably isn't surprising, but he said that guy came out with a mission. He was going to work on the houses. He wasn't there for a photo op. He wanted to hammer some nails, and he did. And he worked hard. And this was just a couple of years ago, so he was pretty old at that point.
Yeah, beautiful spirit. Yeah. He's a true example for a lot of people. That's wonderful. Now, let me ask you. So the baby boomers have these other generations up under them, the millennials and the Gen Z, to be exact. Now, as a man who has now gone through retirement himself and gone through that journey, if you could give some advice, because a lot of times younger folks, they think they're invincible. They don't think that retirement is so far off. They don't envision it, If you could give some advice to millennials, Gen Z, in preparation to see the long vision towards retirement, what advice would you give?
Go to something, don't go from something.
Okay.
A lot of people look at retirement, and I think younger people especially, retirement is when I leave work. And that is true. Mm-hmm. But that isn't the reason to retire. The reason to retire is you're going to go to something you've always wanted to do. Okay. One of the guys, actually a guy in England that I interviewed, said, I worked in analytical, systematic, kind of IT kind of stuff all my life. And I was good at it. And my left brain really works. He said, my retirement was not going to be going away from that. It was going to be going to the right brain of me. Oh. And he said, I'm going to do all creative, artistic, musical. So now he does painting and singing. And he's had a whole series of adventures on the singing side of things where he's formed different groups, and he went to Greece and did a bunch of stuff there and all that. But I think the message from him was, I'm going to something that I've always ignored in my life. Mm-hmm. The creative side of me, I knew it was there, but I want to find out if it's real and how it works and that sort of thing. But I would say go to it. I think the other advice I would have for millennials and Gen Z, you think you're invincible. And you think retirees are different from you. Most of the retirees think they're invincible. They're gonna, and some of that, as you can expect in a book like this, it kind of selects for optimism. It selects for people who are doing cool things and who have a lot of energy.
Yes.
when I'd call somebody up and I'd say, how's your retirement? They say, really awful. And I'd say, well, how'd you like to be interviewed? They say, go away, buddy. So there is a bias towards optimism. But I would say that for most of the retirees, there is this sense that I'm going to keep going. I'm going to be invincible, just like the millennials think they're invincible. That you'd think retirees would come to terms with this better, but I would say 10% of the people really have really thought about those kinds of end of life kinds of things. But most of us, including me, think we're going to keep going forever. So
great advice.
So if the millennials figure out they're not invincible, they'll be ahead of the retirees in doing that.
Start to get a plan together. Now, always when we do these things, when we sit around and we talk to people, interview people, even if they're going through the similar journey that we're going through, we always learn something from other people. So as you put this book together, what has it done for you? What have you learned from it?
I think I learned, I always thought I had an open mind. I always thought I was a listener and I'd do that sort of thing. I found myself hearing things that just were remarkable to me, and the way in which people prioritized this stage of their life, often in ways that I wouldn't do, but I could admire what they did for them. And I think that was part of it. The other thing is an approach, and the guy that did the Cancer Center probably taught me this the best. There's a made-up phrase that I came up with called relaxed intensity, and people say, relaxed intensity, that's just wrong. You're either relaxed or you're intense. Yeah. You can't be both of those things. This guy that did the Cancer Center had relaxed intensity, and he said, this is fun. I'm enjoying it. I'm doing it because I want to. I'm not getting an ulcer over this, even though this may be one of the most important things I've worked on in years.
Gotcha.
So he had an intensity to accomplish, but an attitude that he was never able, well, I don't know if he never, it's maybe too strong a word, but typically in work experiences, people have intensity with very limited relaxation. Gotcha. Retirement has, and there's several examples in the book of people who said, I'm going to do something really important. I'm going to really care about it, but I'm not going to get an ulcer over it.
Gotcha.
And I'm not going to put myself in a situation where deadlines are making me crazy or any of those kinds of things. So relaxed intensity is a phrase that I now use, and people look at me and say, what are you talking about, buddy?
It makes sense. I like that. Relaxed intensity. I'm going to have to incorporate that into my schematics now, my conversation.
I was going to say, and the millennials could use that too, because when I was working, I could have used relaxed intensity. I didn't do that.
We in hindsight, we see things a whole different way, with a whole different perspective, a whole different lens when we get older. So yeah, I understand. I want to ask one more question before we get out of here, because you have a busy lifestyle, Mr. Baby Boomer here.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, and I just forgot it. Okay. For those loved ones, that are surrounding the person that is about to transition into retirement, the children of the retiree, the grandchildren of the retiree, what are some things that we can do as loved ones to make that process easier? And I'm more so considering the emotional, the psychological well-being, because, like we were mentioning earlier, you go from, doing everything, being everything, having somewhere to go, to like, okay, so how do we be a good support system for the retiree?
I think release the retiree from their boundaries, and do it by just being positive about what they want to do.
Okay.
If they want to go climb a mountain and you think that's crazy, say, oh, that'd be really interesting. How would you do that? What? And don't become a downer on the creativity.
Granddaddy, you're too old. You can't climb a mountain.
and there's a lady in the book who had 4 leg surgeries and then went off to climb Kilimanjaro. And I'm sure she had kids who said, you're crazy. You shouldn't do that. all of her girlfriends said that. All of her buddies, all of her boyfriends said, "Don't do this," and she said, "I'm doing it. I'm doing it." So keep that boundary condition, and then not just don't say no, but encourage great lateral thinking.
Great.
In one of the things that I've written, I said, you're not really pressing your limits until your friends and your colleagues and your family say, "You're crazy. Why are you doing that?" But I think
right
that,
path. Okay.
and then, so that everything's okay. Whatever you want to do and whatever you want to explore, no matter how different it is from your background, I would say don't let there be barriers. Let there be encouragement for that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Good points, because I think sometimes the mindset is, when you have difference in generations, is you want to tell the older generation, you just sit here, okay, I'll got it. But it's best for them to kind of encourage and push them out into activities, to do things, to stay moving and involved.
Exactly.
Okay, so we're going to do the random question, and then I want you to tell everybody how the book is on pre-order, how they pick it up, and how they connect with you. And there's going to be a second book, I'm sure. So we've got some retirees that might be listening that want to be interviewed, so they can reach out to you. So let's see what we've got here. Oh, well, I don't know, because you guys have been together for some time, I'm assuming, but we'll see how this goes. If your partner were to surprise you, what would be the ideal date for them to take you on? She's probably already done that for you time and time again.
Yeah. So we've been married for 52 years. So, but she keeps coming up with new surprises. I would say that she's always thinking about different travel things that we could do. And we lived overseas for several years. We've got kind of an openness to exploring different parts of the world. And I would say she would surprise me. Well, most recently, she said, "Let's go for a bike trip in Vietnam." And I think that'd be cool. I think that'd be great. I think we'd have a ball doing that.
That's great. That's great. Vietnam, that's great. I love the food there. All right, Richard. So please tell us how we pick up the book, Shifting Gears, 50 Baby Boomers Share Their Meaningful Journeys to Retirement. And how do we connect with you and all of that stuff?
Okay, so my website is richardhaiduck.com. It's HAIDUCK.com, and that gives updates on the book. It's got various blog posts and various different things that are going on around retirement, and has been quite a resource for people. The book is available on Amazon now as a pre-order for the ebook. This is so complicated. The hardcover is coming in the next few days, and that'll be available for pre-order. And then the book will publish on November 17th. So you can get it at Amazon. You can sign up for that pre-order. But following me on the website, I've got a thing I'm doing now where people who come to the website, I give them a free preview of part of the prologue. Okay. So if they go to the website, they can get that, and it gives them a little bit of a sense of the book and what it's about. And they might enjoy that.
Okay, great. And retirees, keep looking out on Craigslist. You might be the next one to be interviewed, right?
Lana, you say that. I think having done this process now, and now being out in social media, I'm not going to need to go to Craigslist ever again. Great.
Richard, I have enjoyed my time with you. I thank you so much for hanging out with me for this short period of the day. I truly, truly appreciate it.
Well, thank you. This was fun. I thought it would be, and it really did turn out to be great fun.
Great. That is all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I am your host, Lana Reid, and I will see everybody next time. Oh.